Vance's Vatican visit results in a series of rumors that are unimaginable, but there is a basis to them. As you know now, J.D. Vance visited the Pope on Easter Sunday, and the next day we come to find out that the Pope has died on Easter Monday. But it's what results immediately thereafter is where truth becomes stranger than fiction in some ways. But we have several converging events at the same time that we're going to cover today, all beyond reality. So you woke up this morning, if you're like me, early before the sun ever comes up, you go on to X, see what's going on, and you have the trending of Pope Francis, Satan, and Antichrist. So what happened before the Pope perished as it relates to J.D. Vance? You won't believe the story, but doesn't mean it's not out there. And I'll bring you all the details here in just 1 minute. But by the way, this isn't the strangest story I'm going to bring you today. It's just one of the first. I had to wake up and give myself a reality check for what I was reading this morning, but I'm going to bring you all the updates, including Klaus Schwab is no longer in charge of the World Economic Forum. Yeah, this guy. Because anything about that was normal. But who will take over is the bigger question, but one of many stories developing today. One of them I'm going to cover is the J.D. Vance story. Well, I've already seen a few posts on how the Pope dying right after visiting with J.D. Vance means Vance is obviously the Antichrist. So I guess we're going to have a normal one today, huh? Well, I knew the moment I read that nothing was going to be normal. As a matter of fact, at the time of this broadcast, if you look over on your right side, you still have trending Pope Francis and the Antichrist. Do you know the basis of this? Because it is as crazy as what also was supposed to happen yesterday or today, but didn't happen. Do you know what that is? I want you to put it in the comments because it's another one of just rumors overwhelming in the void of any intelligence whatsoever. And yeah, it's irritating. But nonetheless, we would expect nothing less from a party that has lost their way. They have no direction, so they start to engage in incendiary rhetoric. Who was it? What was the stories? Just, again, a few of the stories we're going to cover. You know, I try to bring you all the headlines here. I appreciate each and every one of you. For those of you who subscribe to the channel, thank you. For those of you that haven't yet, I hope you'll just click on that subscribe button. But on top of that, also make sure your bell is checked to all, so you're actually alerted to upcoming broadcasts. The channel is growing exponentially, and that is thanks to each and every one of you and the support you provide me, either via memberships here, or super thanks, or taking the additional step and going to Restricted Republic. Again, the platform Lisa Haven and I created for you to bring you all the news, and we were vindicated yesterday by President Trump. In this article I brought you, now appearing on White House website, The True Origins of COVID-19. And I walked through this on an exclusive broadcast I put up yesterday to show you every single point, to show you how every point listed by the White House now is something we covered years and years ago. And I want you at Restricted Republic today. I hope you'll join us there and you'll realize the origin of Restricted Republic, why it was created, and the necessity to bring you what truth actually is, referenced and researched. RestrictedRepublic.com. But now we got to get back to this absolutely unbelievable story. Pope rebukes Trump administration over immigration deportations and appears to aim directly at Vance. So it appears we are now in an episode of The Sopranos. J.D. Vance goes out there, we're going to talk about this immigration deal a little bit. Vatican notes exchange of opinions over migrants, prisoners in meeting with Vance. You see, Pope Francis didn't agree with Vance's position nor Trump's position on immigration. The more conservative arm of the Vatican did. And so an exchange of ideas happens, a meeting happens. There was an exchange of opinions on the international situation, especially regarding countries affected by war, political tensions, and difficult humanitarian situations, with particular attention to migrants, refugees, and prisoners, the statement said. Finally, hope was expressed for serene collaboration between the state and the Catholic Church. Why were they doing that? Well, as part of all of this, funding was removed from the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church doesn't like that so much. So was serene collaboration appeared to reference Vance's assertion that the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops was resettling illegal immigrants in order to get federal funding. Now it all shapes in together, doesn't it? But what about this Antichrist post? Oh, we're going to continue to go. Papal rebuke on migration. Francis and Vance had tangled sharply over migration. And now I think if you're in the realm of the world of politics or global politics, a visit from J.D. Vance may be something you don't want to receive because J.D. Vance went. Today I met with the Holy Father, Pope Francis, on Easter Sunday, Resurrection Day. And the meeting occurred, and then the next day we get the news that the Pope has died. It's chilling in a way, huh? But it gets worse. If you remember how I joined the resistance by J.D. Vance on April 1st of 2020, Vance didn't like the Catholic Church when he was a kid. Even before he started going to Pentecostal church, Vance thought he knew certain things about Catholicism, which he didn't like. I knew that Catholics worshipped Mary. I knew they rejected the legitimacy of Scripture, and I knew that the Antichrist, or at least the Antichrist's spiritual advisor, would be a Catholic. But of course, what happens when someone gets a narrative that they don't agree with? They start rumors and hearsay. And again, back to this post that I have woken up and seen a few posts on how the Pope dying right after visiting with J.D. Vance means Vance is obviously the Antichrist. And that is what our news cycle has now boiled into. Conjecture, hearsay, and rumor, but not the worst of the conjecture, hearsay, and rumor we're going to cover here today. Oh, absolutely not. Just want to give you a little basis of why you're reading that. But again, be wary. If you receive a visit from Vance, it could spell disaster for you. Trump and Vance erupted Zelensky in tense Oval Office meeting. And why did that happen? Oh, that was right after Vance met with Zelensky. And the partnership between the U.S. and Ukraine was all but dead. Coincidences abound, don't they? Of course, I'm saying this tongue-in-cheek. I hope you understand that. But let's go on to more serious issues. If you watched my broadcast yesterday, I hope you did. I took exception with the Supreme Court, and I have continued to take exception with the Supreme Court for overriding the executive branch. And Trump has provided many warnings of this. This was the video yesterday. The fatal weaknesses warning, fatal weakness in the Supreme Court ruling that for whatever reason they decided that they just had to step in just before the Easter holiday and put out the matter is currently pending before the Fifth Court. So we want you, the government is directed not to remove any members of the putative class of detainees from the United States. Well, Alito dissented, Thomas dissented. And we didn't find out till last night exactly why he dissented in a scathing rebuke of the Supreme Court. And to recap it for you, fairly easy. It is not clear that the court even had jurisdiction, which I covered for you yesterday. They don't. Therefore, this court had jurisdiction only if the Court of Appeals had jurisdiction of the applicant's appeal, which many will contest they do not, but they had to rush this through. The papers before us, while alleging the applicants were in imminent danger of removal, provide little concrete support for that allegation, but the Supreme Court still decided to rule. In sum, literally in the middle of the night, The court issued unprecedented and legally questionable relief without giving the lower courts a chance to rule, without hearing from the opposing party within 8 hours of receiving the application, with dubious factual support for its order, and without providing any explanation for its order. But some in the Supreme Court decided it was important enough that they had to immediately drop an Easter ruling that Trump and his administration is calling fatally flawed. And so let the battle ensue, because Alito just set it up. I refused to join the court's order because we had no good reason to think that under the circumstances, issuing an order at midnight was necessary or appropriate, because they had already issued an order in which Trump is following. Does it make sense? No. The executive and judicial branch of the U.S. government is heading headlong into one of the most important conflicts that we will see. The resolution is still pending, but there's been many of these moving parts right now. Did you hear the saga of Fauci? Again, I did exclusively on Restricted yesterday, this saga of Fauci, but we have different details now. Fauci's first year of retirement was a money-making bonanza. How much? He earned $3.5 million in his first year of retirement. How did they know that? Well, because they went into open records, Anthony Fauci's transaction history, revocable trust. And it's pretty easy when you go down into this, and you'll see my yellow highlights start kicking in. Ooh, funds received, $700,000. Or if you go to another record, $150,000. Or another record, a little bit lower in this document, there's another 100,000 followed by another 100,000. Man, the man has every right to invest. And this will have to be explored further, but man, that's an awful lot of money. Gonna beg a few questions, right? But he's always been honest with us. Well, not quite, because in that same release, we find out more, and this was coming out of the Daily Caller, mind you. Fauci announced in August of 2022 that he would retire in December of 2022. But that didn't happen. Now, Open the Books has uncovered evidence to Fauci's application for immediate retirement that he delayed his retirement until January 6th of 2023. How do we know that? Because Fauci told us. Date of final separation, 1/6 of 2023. Why is that an issue? In both the transcribed interview with congressional investigators in January of 2024 and in public congressional testimony under oath in June of 2024, Fauci described his retirement from federal service as having occurred in December of 2022. And hence, you should have another issue, right? Of course, he seems to be Teflon, isn't he? Fauci's extraordinary MOU with the U.S. Marshal Service cost taxpayers roughly $15 million. How do you feel about your tax dollars going towards that? Go ahead, put it in the comments. I know how I feel about it, and it is not happy. Not happy at all. Not happy with the federal government, not happy with my state government, state of Arizona, Katie Hobbs coming out, and vetoing. Let me read her words. You and I both disagreed with the previous administration's immigration policies, and we have both disagreed with the next administration's immigration policies. I have worked productively with the federal government to secure our border, stopping fentanyl at our ports of entry through the task force SAFE, disrupt cartels' operation with Operation Desert Guardian, and worked across all levels of government to keep communities safe. And what did she do? She vetoed Senate Bill 1164, advising that our law enforcement should work with federal law enforcement officials to enforce immigration laws. But she vetoed it. So anything you say in your subsequent paragraph is an empty commitment to me, but there's been tons of empty commitments and improper commitments of what we reported to you. I said my main goal of this trip was to meet with Kilmer. Tonight I had a chance. I'd called his wife, Jennifer. We've covered this story. But I told you, my biggest issue with this, outside of the facts and evidence provided in abundance, was the facts that my taxpayer dollars went towards his trip, and I received response. You don't know that. Okay. Well, then let's listen to Senator Chris Van Hollen himself.
Who did pay for this trip?
This was an officially cleared, congressional trip, cleared on a bipartisan basis. Yes,
Thank you. Thank you. Another victory lap. Folks, these concepts are black and white. I can't believe some people still try to argue them, but at least Stephen Miller came out and gave us a ray of hope about reparations. Not the type you think. No. Reparation for those affected by allowing illegal immigrants into the country. You can listen to just a portion of it here, and please enjoy the argument.
Then we had open borders. Now our schools are in chaos and disarray. We need hundreds of translators. Nobody's learning how to read or write. Entire cities. Look at Los Angeles. Once a paradise of safety, security, and prosperity. Entire neighborhoods occupied and controlled by foreign gangs. Where do all the residents who've been displaced, who've been forced out of Los Angeles, where do they go to get their reparations? And then what about the victims of fentanyl poisoning brought in by Democrats' open border? Hundreds of thousands of moms and dads whose kids are dead and buried in the ground. Where do they go to get their reparations?
Isn't it nice to just have a voice of reason? Finally, time and time again, when you have to weed through the amount of misinformation propagated by those who claim that we were misinformation, you were misinformation, your posts were misinformation, everything you're doing is a danger to democracy. And whenever they say danger to democracy, pretty much disqualified, in my humble opinion, of course, because then you'd have to take things like this as fact. And San Francisco Chronicle tripped off one of the biggest stories that didn't occur yesterday or today. The rumor, hearsay, and conjecture of, is Trump preparing to invoke the Insurrection Act? Signs are pointing that way. That's right. And hence, the firestorm began. The clock is ticking down on a crucial but little-noticed part of President Donald Trump's first round of executive orders, the one tasking the Secretary of Department of Defense and Department of Homeland Security to submit a joint report within 90 days, recommending whether to invoke the Insurrection Act. And so the rumors began. The declaration here, January 20th of 2025. This statement within it. Within 90 days of this proclamation, give me a report so I can discuss whether to invoke the Insurrection Act of 1807. They use this as leverage that, of course, he's a tyrant. Because of that date, which would be then, 90 days forward, April 20th of 2025, Resurrection Day, Easter, but nothing occurred. And today, so far, nothing has occurred, but that doesn't stop them, do they? No, they make it even worse. I think this is all a theist, it's a whatever. I get it, it doesn't matter. Part 1, on April 20th, 2025, the United States may cross the point of no return. And as his 2 months in office have already shown, he won't stop at just legal opinion. Expect an executive order even the same day or the next, officially declaring the Insurrection Act, restricting freedoms in the name of restoring control of the border, and perhaps in blue state cities, and setting the large plan in motion. Of course, this won't be framed as an attack on democracy. It will be packaged as a necessary response to crisis, and authoritarian takeovers always are, but once it happens, there's no going back. There will be no point of return. Of course, the left gobbles this up like candy. Resist. Oh, what is this? Resist. Demonstrations grow just as planned. The false flag crisis, turning protest into terror. Trump declares expanding martial law. Mass arrest and opposition leaders. Military National Guard take over major cities. Press censorship. Total media control. Borders close and dissidents are trapped inside. Elections are postponed indefinitely. This was everything that was supposed to happen over the last 48 hours. Everything they wanted to rumor. But if that wasn't enough, he did part 2. If the blank actually hits the fan. Within it, he gives, well, direction. But let's suppose it's April 21st, which is today, and Trump has just invoked the Insurrection Act. What then? Well, here's how it goes. On or slightly after April 20th, 2025, Trump will most likely sign an executive order invoking the Insurrection Act. And even if he did, do you think it would come in the shape that they're declaring it will? Hold on for 1 minute. So what do we do? Because he gives direction. But a few of us won't be, at least not entirely, because we saw this coming. The ultimate purpose is to eventually fully overthrow the United States government, put Trump his billionaire co-conspirators, and people who share the values of his very fuzzy reactionary political coalition fully and permanently in control. Can you hear the voice? This should have just fallen on deaf ears, as people saying there. We always have people trying to gain clicks, trying to gain views through any incendiary rhetoric they can put up there. But no, the Democrats seized on it. As a veteran, if martial law is declared in the U.S., it means the Constitution is suspended, civilian government gone, freedom of speech, assembly, the press gone. Curfews, checkpoints, arrests without warrants, no due process. I believe the military would stand with the people and the Constitution. Oh, they seized on it. It was so important to the left, so critical to focus on this, that even Snopes had to investigate it. Investigating rumor Trump will declare martial law on April 20th after invoking the Insurrection Act of 1807. You see how this became so highlighted? However, as of this writing on April 9th, this rumor existed more as a prediction than a provable claim. Searches of the websites for the Department of Defense, this is how deep they went, the Department of Defense, the Department of Homeland Security, and the White House yielded no such announcements, statements, or demonstrable evidence that might help to shed light on this unproven matter. But yet it was important enough, you Snopes, to put up there, the ultimate of fact checkers, to even give it credence. Well, that was the plan, wasn't it? To give it credence by publication, so that people would gobble up yet another rumor, misinformation, and conjecture that you yourself used to blame the right of doing. But when they did it, oh, it was a horrific event. But now, it's a prediction. It's not a provable claim. Would you have said the left if the right started the same rumor, misinformation, and propaganda? My ruling is I think not. But that is the political landscape we now live in. But just to give it a little bit more credence, in comes, one of my least favorite characters in U.S. government, Jamie Raskin, who puts through this warning.
Try to prevent the spread of the lawlessness and the fascist chaos that's been unleashed against us. But implicit in it should be the idea that if and when we come back to power, and we will, we are not going to look kindly upon people who facilitated, to use a word of the day, who facilitated authoritarianism in our country.
Jamie, you always have the best way to make my arguments. And for that, sir, I am eternally thankful to you, because you, Jamie Raskin, always confirm exactly what we conclude in the very statements when we come back to power, and we will. Are not going to look kindly upon people who facilitated authoritarianism in our country. So in other words, you view the current political system as completely corrupt and illegitimate, a band of illegals floating through the halls of U.S. government, disrupting everything that democracy was meant to be. But where's your position on illegal immigration? Because that, I guess, according to what I've read of yours, is, well, it's okay, it's policy. You see the hypocrisy? They have one agenda, in my humble opinion: the disruption of what is to be, based on the Constitution, the great Republic of the United States of America. They don't view that as a viable system. No, they view a larger view of world governance as being the ultimate harbinger of peace, love, and joy. So bad is it that we had to weed through stories of J.D. Vance being the Antichrist, the insurrection being thrown down upon us over the last 2 days, cities being locked down, people being locked up, media being silenced, and believe that somewhere within that was any shred of reality. I'm so happy that each of you are here so that I can walk you through all these headlines and what the actual factual basis, in the opinion of Restricted Republic, is. I love you all. Until next time, Godspeed and God bless. Justus Knight, signing out.